Okay, Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway is this weekend. And guys, in anticipation of that absolutely monstrous event, I'm going to have a bit of a look back on the career of the notorious Conor McGregor. And it was a notorious career, there's no doubt about that. But I'm mainly going to focus on his fights. I'm going to start off from his first fight in the UFC, and we're going to work our way through quickly up into this Max Holloway rematch this coming weekend. Haven't seen that much media content. You look back at the career of McGregor, and there was so much noise and attention around his career. Where I feel like this fight, of all fights, the comeback fight after 5 years, is kind of slipping under the radar. I want to hear more news. So, with that in mind, I'm going to make this video today, guys, and we're going to have a look back at the illustrious career of the former two-time UFC champion, the notorious Conor McGregor. And guys, for context, before we kick this video off, um, I live about 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from Conor McGregor. I'm a similar age to Conor McGregor. I would say that we had a similar upbringing, which we probably did, both coming from a kind of blue collar background within Dublin, Ireland. So I have a bit of a take on Conor McGregor. And look, guys, I'm broadcasting fights, I'm live streaming fights, I'm uploading content news the last 10 years around mixed martial arts. So sit back and enjoy this one. We're going to take a look at the career of Conor McGregor. This is going to be interesting, guys. So I felt like this was a fitting image to kick this video off with. I think it was Ivan Butchinger at Cage Warriors 51 when Conor McGregor became the two-weight world champion. Something that he would later go on and accomplish within the Ultimate Fighting Championship. But the fact that he did it in Cage Warriors set the precedent for McGregor and the type of level he wanted to attain within the UFC. It was only a matter of time before McGregor got into the UFC, and he got into the UFC after becoming the two-weight Cage Warriors world champion. His first opponent was Marcus Brimage. Does that matter? Not really in the trajectory of McGregor's career, but it matters because Marcus Brimage was a fighter out of American Top Team. He was somebody who had a solid base. He'd come through, I think it was the Ultimate Fighter in the UFC. And was he a phenom or a monster? No, but he was a fighter kind of on the come up who had a good skill set and was good enough to compete in the UFC. Within that respected weight division, this was McGregor's return to featherweight. So after becoming the lightweight world champion within Cage Warriors, he was now stepping back down to featherweight, a weight division that McGregor felt he could bully his opponents in. And I'll be honest with you guys, McGregor's style when he first showed up in the UFC, in particular for this Brimage fight, was it was unseen. He had that kind of karate stance. He was extremely good at striking when he was backing up. He had a really long reach. Look at the size of his head, even in this image. I know that's a bit of a bizarre thing to say, but he was really big for this weight division, and he was cutting a lot of weight and rehydrating to have an advantage over his opponents, an advantage that any fighter at that time, even this day and age, would take in mixed martial arts. And Conor McGregor made full use of it. You can see in his debut, guys, he mixed it up with Brimage. He got stuck in there, but it was the long shots from McGregor, staying on the outside, particularly the uppercut, the knees, the elusive attacks that got him the win. And all of a sudden, guys, a star was born. Like, we can look at the career of Conor McGregor and try and compare it to another mixed martial artist, particularly somebody in the UFC, let's say, for example, and there is no comparison with McGregor. He really has set the bar, particularly in the UFC, on what you need to do to become a star. People knew McGregor was coming before he was in the UFC, and when he arrived with an absolute bang. I haven't got it in this video, but a moment in particular that was a really big moment as well for Conor McGregor was when he was in the Ferrari with Dana White. And, McGregor, he just made a stamp on it straight away. When you're going to make a debut in the UFC and you want to make an absolute explosion in that debut, really get people talking, you do exactly what McGregor did. And he finished his opponent in the fourth round, Marcus Brimage. It was easy work. And all of a sudden, everybody took notice. The fans took notice. And McGregor was particularly impressive in the post-fight press conference. I remember this. I haven't got the video. He had the pocket watch on. He was sat beside Brad Pickett, who was already a well-known fighter within the UFC, another European fighter. But here, this guy just had he had a different type of aura about him. And at this point, McGregor hadn't got the money. He was fresh off the social welfare. The guy was in debt at this point. But he was talking the talk. And we'd seen from that debut He can walk the walk. So as the UFC machine rolls on, McGregor's next fight, it came thick and fast, and it was against the man he will be fighting this weekend, Max Blessed Holloway. Both men extremely young in their career. And if I actually have a look at the, just to put it into context, I have a look at the event they were fighting on. It was Mauricio Shogun who had taken on Chael Sonnen. Who else was on that fight card? Alistair Overeem, Brown, Uriah Faber, Hall versus Howard. Like, guys, these, like, Conor McGregor is around an absolute minute. That was like 2013. You know what I mean? I know he's had a 5 year layoff coming up to this fight this weekend, but he's up there with the absolute legends in the sport. There's no doubt about that, and I'm going to show you why. So in this fight, McGregor was particularly impressive. He had a bad injury in this fight, tore something in his leg, and kind of took Holloway down, controlled him for the fight. It was a young Max Holloway. Do I think that same outcome is going to happen this weekend? Absolutely not. But it was still an impressive performance from Conor McGregor, and he rolls on in the UFC. He got the win over Max Holloway. Look, he was a young up and comer. He was not a recognised fighter at the time, but the fans took notice, and all of a sudden, McGregor's name was getting bigger and bigger within the world of mixed martial arts. He was the hype. He was calling the fights and he was finishing the fights exactly when he said. Now, 2 fights into his UFC career, and McGregor has a fight with Diego Brandao. Guys, I was at the weigh-ins for this fight. I couldn't get tickets for the fight at the time, but this fight went down in Dublin, Ireland, and this was 2014. Another extremely impressive performance from McGregor in what was an absolutely electric night of fights from Dublin, Ireland. And we know the Irish show up. They always show up. But McGregor was really impressive in this contest. Brandao had a bit of a name for himself back then within the UFC as being a bit of a psychopath. I remember he pulled a knife on another fighter. He was very mouthy. And McGregor shut him up. He shut him up with that long, straight left. We can see it in the video here, guys. Look up. You can see the long left hand of McGregor. That was the story of this guy's career. He just could crack. And when that left let go, I believe he said it himself. It was like a shotgun. And he ran through Diego Brandao that night in Dublin, Ireland. And he really made a name for himself after this one. He was the hype. He was detraining. He was derailing anybody they put in front of him. And I'll pause it here, guys, because this was a moment. This was an absolute moment within the career of Conor McGregor. You can see here Dan Hardy, former fighter winning the UFC, and former commentator. Actually, he had a run in with Herb Dean. I'm sure there's a video on my channel somewhere about that. But this moment was really important because McGregor got the finish in Dublin, Ireland. And he went on to say, "We are not here to take part. We are here to take over." And he took over without a shadow of a doubt. People can say what they want about Conor McGregor, and we'll talk about some of the other stuff that went on within his career in this video. But cannot deny the fighting skill set of Conor McGregor. The accomplishments, they're there for themselves. They speak for themselves. Like him, don't like him. The guy can fight. He could fight. And he's going to fight again this weekend, guys. So here was another important part in Conor's career. And this was a really impressive part of McGregor's career in terms of his pre-fight trash talk. This was the one opponent, Dustin Poirier, who was kind of semi-established within the UFC, was so well-rounded, tough to finish, had big finishes himself already at this point, and he kind of felt disrespected that the new guy, Conor McGregor, was coming in, making all this noise, saying, "I'm going to finish you, this and that." Poirier felt like he was just going to blow him away. But one thing I will say about this fight is Conor McGregor, without a shadow of a doubt, he definitely was in the head of Dustin Poirier. You know, I think you could see here, I took this image because it was important to me, because Poirier just seemed rattled before this fight. He seemed confused at the idea of McGregor beating him, how he could beat him. It seemed like easy work for P-Head back then, but it wasn't an easy night because McGregor came in, like he did in his previous fights, extremely confident. And his striking at that point in time was untouched. It was unmatched. He was so light on his feet. He could crack kicks like whips, and he ended up catching Poirier. It was behind the head, but who was in the ring? Herb Dean. He doesn't give a shit about shots that land behind the head, but McGregor finished him, and it was extremely impressive. And once again, McGregor's stock just kept continuing to rise. He was telling everybody just to shh and wait for what was coming. And what was coming was an absolute freight train of success for the notorious Conor McGregor. And guys, I keep showing the images of the fans because the fans, particularly the Irish fans, we support our own. And without the fans, McGregor wouldn't be where he is today. It's as simple as that. He had weigh-ins that had more people in attendance than some UFC events, but it was the Irish fans that kept showing up. And like it or not, it wasn't just Irish fans. It was the whole world. Everybody was taking notice of this dude. It was something completely different. So we had the Dennis Seaver fight. I can't remember what happened in the pre-build up to the Seaver fight. I think he was supposed to fight somebody else, and they ended up pulling out or getting injured. Like I can't remember, but Seaver was basically a lamb to slaughter when in that contest. Conor McGregor walked through him. I think Seaver just had that kind of barrel-like T-Rex stance that was never going to get near McGregor. He had a decent overhand left. He was probably on juice, but he was old in the game, and McGregor, he was new in the game, and McGregor had eyes on one man within that featherweight division. All these fights were amounting to one thing, and that was for Conor McGregor to replicate the success he had in Cage Warriors and become a two-weight world champion within the UFC. No easy feat, as we've seen in the past. So you can see here, after the Seaver fight, Conor McGregor coming out and facing off with the GOAT at the time within that weight division, who was Jose Aldo, a phenom in his own right. And that fight was just building and building and building. McGregor was supposed to fight Aldo. Aldo got injured. And on a few days' notice, Conor McGregor took a fight with Chad Mendes. And Mendes fighting, guys, absolute beast. Takedowns, top of the weight division at the time. A real curveball from McGregor, who didn't seem to mind opponents changing. He would fight anyone at any given time. He was still undefeated within the UFC at this point. And this one would be for the interim world title. Could McGregor get gold? This was a hell of a fight. It was one of the more memorable fights, in my opinion, in Conor McGregor's career. He was really tested in this contest by Chad Mendes, taken down time after time. And Mendes just had this grinding, wearing fighting style that seemed like the perfect remedy to beat the undefeated Conor McGregor, but it was not to be that night for Chad Mendes because McGregor just found something deep down. He kept hacking away at Mendes, and you can see the damage on McGregor's face in that fight. He was busted wide open for the first time in his career. He was really tested for the first time in his UFC career in this Mendes fight. And had he got the bottle and the balls to push through it and find a way to win, and guys, the crazy thing about it was that night he did. He was relentless with the front kick. He found a way to win. He landed big shots on Mendes and he wore him out and he showed the whole world that I'm here to stay. All of a sudden, the Irishman had attained a UFC world title. It wasn't against Aldo for the belt, but it was an interim title and it was a chance to finally get his hands on Aldo, a guaranteed ticket, providing the featherweight Brazilian kingpin could stay fit. So it was a big point in McGregor's career winning that fight. And looking back on it now, guys, all he wanted was Aldo. And I felt the way the UFC built up the Aldo and McGregor fight was absolutely perfect. The press conferences, the amount of footage they had building up to that. And look at that moment. Who can remember when he grabbed the belt? July 11th, the McGregor era. And, he was already the champion before he was even the champion in his own eyes. And it finally went down, guys, at UFC 194. What a night it was. But if you went for a cup of tea or if you decided to go out for a cigarette at the start of this fight, you were going to be in big, big trouble because the fight only lasted 13 seconds. McGregor wiped him out with that straight left hand. Aldo was left looking up at the lights in no time. And guys, after this, the sky was the limit for Conor McGregor. He was on a rocket ship to the absolute peak of stardom. He was starting to attain more social media followers than the UFC. He was becoming bigger than the UFC. All of a sudden, the UFC had this cash cow. Could they keep control of this money monster who just kept showing up, kept impressing people, kept winning, still undefeated in the UFC at this point as we go to this press conference? And McGregor had his eye on one thing, and at the time, the opponent wasn't too important in this one, guys. What was important was what was in front of Rafael dos Anjos, and that was the UFC lightweight world title. He'd knocked out Jose Aldo. He'd become the featherweight champion. Now he wanted that lightweight title. He wanted to replicate the same thing he did in Cage Warriors. So it was a moment for McGregor to lay into Dos Anjos. And behind it all, guys, is the sheer amount of money this guy was creating for the UFC. He was breaking pay-per-view records. Dos Anjos could not make the fight, so McGregor decided to take another fight. And this was a kind of risk and a slight downturn in the career of Conor McGregor because he took a fight with one badass dude, and that was Nate Diaz. McGregor took the fight at welterweight, I believe this was. Was it welterweight? Uh, Yeah, it was welterweight at the time. And guys, Diaz got the better of him on the night. For me, McGregor was carrying too much weight. He didn't really get a chance to turn into that animal that he turned into at featherweight when he cut that insane amount of weight. I felt like he had to mentally hit a switch when he was fighting at featherweight, and he just took him to a different primal zone. Where I felt at welterweight, he came in, he felt he was comfortable. This is going to be an easy night against a sloppy brawler like Nate Diaz, but he just didn't consider the fact that Nate Diaz is Nate Diaz and he can just get hit and keep on coming. And that's what happened that night. McGregor punched himself out on Diaz, and Diaz just kept walking forward. And then Diaz started landing shots. And at one point, we seen this was the first point we seen in Conor McGregor's career where he went for a takedown in the UFC. He was struggling. And he didn't get that takedown, guys. Diaz ended up on top. He ended up walking McGregor, making his way to the back and finding that choke. And for the first time, Conor McGregor was facing some adversity in his career. He had taken a loss to Nate Diaz. Some of that shine was gone. McGregor wanted the rematch immediately, did everything he could to get that rematch immediately, and he got it. And it was a big point in McGregor's career because here he'd been defeated by Diaz. This was kind of stalemating and slowing down his championship run. He'd taken a fight with an opponent he didn't expect to lose, and he lost. So he had to take the rematch. And the rematch was just as tough for McGregor, but it had a different outcome. McGregor did find his way back into this fight, and I think justifiably won the Nate Diaz rematch on points. Judge's decision. He landed some big shots. So did Diaz. It was a decent fight. It was a lot more technical than the first fight. But McGregor did just enough win in the end to win that fight. And this kind of Nate Diaz um, segment within McGregor's career, he could now kind of put to the side and park off and go and do what he always wanted to do. And that was, guys, the big one in Madison Square Garden, if I do believe. It was for the UFC Lightweight World Championship. Eddie Alvarez, he was the man holding it at the time, and what McGregor did was just put on an absolute masterpiece that night. I felt like he was at his absolute pinnacle within his career. The shots he hit at Eddie Alvarez with were crisp, decisive, no wasted energy. He had his hands behind his back at one point, and he obliterated the UFC lightweight champion. And I'd love to show the videos of these clips, but they'll just copyright me 6 ways from Sunday if I do. But McGregor becoming the two-weight world champion in the UFC and putting everybody on notice. All of a sudden, things had changed. Now he was a two-weight world champion, and his name demanded respect. There was no doubt about it. But one thing that McGregor got was tons of cash, but he wanted more. They always want more. And he was about to get it with the next segment of McGregor's career, and that was his boxing venture against, at the time, TBE, the best ever money Floyd Mayweather. And this was a crazy situation within the UFC because all of a sudden we had a current two-weight world champion leaving the organization with the backing of Dana White to go and compete in boxing. And this hadn't happened before. This was a one-off, and it was a one-off purely because of what I said earlier on in the video. McGregor was beginning to get bigger than the UFC. They had this cash cow. How can they keep control of him? Okay, he wants to fight Floyd Mayweather. Well, let's let him fight Floyd Mayweather and let him make some money and then come back. And I'm sure the UFC brass were concerned about the fact that he could go off here and make 100 million fighting and boxing. But what happens when he comes back to the UFC? Because he ain't going to get that 100 million again. We all know that. So as you can see, Mayweather, who this week was actually declared bankrupt or something, and it's not the first time, and I'm not even going to get into that. Set to make 300 million. McGregor set to make $100 million. who could knock the guy. But Dana White supported him, and McGregor went and got an absolute payday for that fight. The fight itself, McGregor was slightly competitive within the start of it. He did land a couple of shots on Floyd, but Floyd just got the better of him, and the constant pressure from TBE, the best ever money Floyd Mayweather, was too much for the Irishman. And McGregor came up short that night, but he didn't come up short in the long run because the money he made in that fight would change his career forever. And I felt like after the Floyd Mayweather fight, McGregor had kind of hit the top of his career. This was the peak. This was the pinnacle. So we had escalated up, 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 up. And then after the Mayweather one, I just felt like the trajectory of McGregor's career plummeted. And here's a good point of it, guys. At this point in time, McGregor and Khabib was the most dominant lightweight in the UFC. McGregor was kind of out of game for a minute for all different reasons, and Khabib was on the bus, and we all remember when McGregor threw the dolly at the bus. And I just have to show some of these because it is pivotal points within McGregor's career. He had so much trouble with law enforcement. He got himself into court for all different reasons, but eventually he found his way to that Khabib fight. And this was McGregor at his most toxic. I felt like it really was him at his most nastiest, lowest point in his career. He was probably dealing with substance abuse, drinking way too much alcohol. He had way too much money. There was probably very little people financially handling him. And if they were financially handling or helping him, they probably had their own interest at heart. I'm not trying to make excuses for Conor McGregor's behaviour, but I'm just kind of looking at it as if it was me in his shoes. But he did eventually get that Khabib fight, and it did not go the way he had hoped. Albeit, I will say this about McGregor. He had got some type of a sustained leg injury in this fight. He still showed up. He never pulled out fights. He was competitive, if not the most competitive competitor Khabib had faced within the UFC. He won a round, maybe 2 rounds, but it was Khabib's night, and McGregor struggled against him. I feel like Khabib clipped him with a few shots, and after that, McGregor didn't know whether to defend, the takedown, the punches, but eventually he got found out. And guys, the only unfortunate thing about this fight was the outcome after it. Khabib had won. He jumped into the crowd on top of Conor McGregor's teammates. Khabib's teammates start jumping into the crowd, and absolute chaos unfolded. And you can see the outcome. Conor McGregor receives 6 months suspension, fined 50 grand for his role in that UFC 229 brawl. It was an absolute mess. And after that, guys, things got worse. McGregor attacked some granddad in a local pub that had links to the Kinahan cartel. He was in and out of court. Everything was going bad for Conor McGregor. I'm not going to get into every single case and every single detail because I don't want to. I want to focus on the fights because that's what I enjoy watching and that's what I focus on here on the channel. So a perfect comeback opponent for Conor McGregor after the 2018 destruction from Khabib Nurmagomedov was Donald Cowboy Cerrone McGregor. I want to pause that right there because what really impressed me in this fight is he adapted a completely new strike within the UFC with that shoulder attack. It was very, very impressive. And he took out Cerrone with a combination of head kicks and that shoulder attack. And he was back, guys. This was 2020. He got another performance of the night performance, and he came back with a bang. McGregor showed us that he can miss a couple of years out of fight game and come back. And one thing I'll say about McGregor is he was extremely humble and respectful when he came back for the Cerrone fight, and he kind of kept that humble. I just show a shot of him and D because his wife is stuck beside him through absolutely everything. But McGregor, that comeback performance, it was impressive. And it would be another year later before we'd see him back against Dustin Poirier. And guys, he kept that kind of humble, respectful, nice guy mantra with Dustin Poirier, and it didn't work out because McGregor came up short on the night. He had lost another fight, this one, a year later to Dustin Poirier. So McGregor losing to Poirier. He was a bit humble in defeat. He was respectful to Poirier, but a year had passed, and all of a sudden McGregor was no longer respectful in the rematch. He was back to the old notorious Conor McGregor. He was going to get the win against Poirier. This was the one. McGregor was disrespecting Poirier's wife. He was doing everything he could to get into the head of Dustin Poirier before this trilogy fight went down. He looked supremely confident. He'd done it against Nate Diaz. Surely he could get the rematch win against Poirier, but guys, it was a disaster of a night for Conor McGregor on the 10th of July 2021. He threw a kick. He went to fall back on the foot, and his whole leg completely split in half. It was a horrific, horrific injury that went down 5 years ago. And you can see him here, guys, just to put it into context. The guy was screaming in pain, as you would be. And I would have already been unconscious. That'd have pissed me pants. But Conor McGregor went on to do an interview with Joe Rogan. We all remember the interview, what was said, heat in a moment, toxic stuff. But McGregor, this looked like the end of Conor McGregor. It really did. When I remember watching this 5 years ago when he was stretching out, thinking, "There's no way, this guy is done. We're not going to see that karate stance anymore. The old bravado of the notorious one. It's over." But within them 5 years, McGregor faced a whole host of different allegations and different situations and different problems within his life that right now I'm not going to focus on them, but he seems to have worked past, and he's found God. He's now married, so he looks like he's going to make a charge and make one more comeback in the UFC. We already had the comeback a year or two ago when he was scheduled to fight Michael Chandler in the UFC. And at this point, I think McGregor was on the juice after the injury. He was trying to do what he could to make his way back. I don't know if he was ever serious about the Michael Chandler fight. It felt like he wasn't, but now he is serious, guys, because we are only 7 days away. July 11th. And the notorious one will be making his comeback, and he seems at peace. He seems calm. He seems mentally right. He's got a tough opponent in front of him. This is a very different Max Holloway than we see in the image behind me. The people of Hawaii are behind Max Holloway. Conor McGregor has an extremely tough test in this fight on July 11th, guys. I'm going to be watching the whole fight live on YouTube. Do check it out. And personally, guys, I cannot wait for this comeback. We have not seen enough attention behind this fight this week for me. So I said I'd make this video and kind of have a look back at the career of Conor McGregor, because it was a notorious career start to finish. Can he do it this weekend against Holloway, guys? I don't know. I don't know. I'm pushed for a winner in this fight. I don't want to go against McGregor because he'll probably see the fight and knock the bollocks out of me. I'm only messing, guys. But look, take it easy. Until the fight on Saturday, I'm going to keep pumping content out on all the channels. So stay tuned for it. Conor McGregor taking on Max Holloway this weekend.